Okay, welcome everybody here to KC Happy Hour. It has been a hectic last 72 hours recapping the U.S. Pro Kart Series at Speed Sports Racing Park in Houston. First, before we get into the show, I just wanted to say congrats to Alan and Jessica Rudolph and the whole Speed Sports crew. Talk with Alan a bit as last year went on. We've had him on the show before, kind of promoting some of the races he's been doing. Getting a big marquee event at that racetrack was a big goal of theirs for the long, long time. And we were championing it and having fun on our own with the kind of silly season for tracks for the national circuit of guessing where series we're going to go. Granted, we're kind of insider trading a little bit, being in bed with a lot of these series, working with them, kind of working logistics out. So we get a little bit of a head start, which is a bit unfair to anyone else guessing where places are going to go. But it was super cool to see that. It was cool to have a big national race in Texas for the first time in about 10 years. And to be honest, the track raced pretty well. So there's a lot to unpack from that event. The U.S. Pro Kart Series put out a big announcement today with the race director, Blake Hunt. I know they wanted to get that out because in partial kudos to all you guys tuning into the show every week and talking to the series about thoughts on it and caring what my idiot self has to say, and the awesome people that come and help us produce the show and join the show is a big reason why we're getting some of these notices and updates so early in the week coming after a race weekend. So that's super cool. That obviously goes a kudos out to our entire audience, our whole KC family of everyone across the world and across the U.S. But that we're going to table that a little bit later on in the show. We'll give everybody a little bit of time to tune in. I know there's a lot to unpack from it. Honestly, a lot of it's really, really good stuff. I have my thoughts on it. We had a big response from a lot of you guys on the Ask Xander question post that we put out earlier today, both on our Instagram story and on Facebook. I'm going to answer all those, as well as some negative comments that we got over the last week or so. I don't think they were super negative, but they were fair criticisms. I was pretty vocal about the FIA a couple weeks ago. I still stand by those statements. I think that's all fair. Before we get into a lot of that stuff, there's one question of kind of why I don't go at the series as hard. And a big reason is that thankfully, because of the extremely lucky position that we're in as a company, where I get to be in the conversations I get to be in, I get to try and influence a little bit of that from behind closed doors. I'm not saying I'm in any way a big influencer in that regard. The series still do their own. We're just the media company that covers it. But getting to talk to them first, I'm a big proponent of trying to solve problems without going straight to public, without going straight to the media and blasting anybody. I'd much rather us make big progress with the sport, with the industry, with the series, with whoever, and settling things kind of just, in a smaller room and making those influences forward. I don't have that connection with the FIA. I wish I did, and I wish those guys made those connections, but we don't. But with the series, we're able to make those kinds of impacts. So to everyone in the KC Nation and everyone on the KC family around the world and here in the U.S., a lot of the positive impacts that you're seeing in the sport, I think, are because of everything that everybody's doing and all the added influence that everyone's putting on all the series. And they want to work hard too. And that's the other half of those conversations. I'd never badmouth someone if they were purposely trying to do something good, especially if they're willing to have conversations about it, which I confidently can say that every series in the U.S. wants good racing, wants clean racing. That's a big reason why that USPKS bulletin came out, and that's a big reason why these guys are making all the decisions that they are. So that's going to wait till a little bit later. There's a lot of other positives besides just dwelling on the same things we always dwell about, from licensing to penalties to whatnot. And of course, one of the stars of last weekend's show was Elio Meza, who was a phenomenal talent, who is a phenomenal talent, and is an amazing personality. We're super proud to have that kid here. So first, let me bring in our standard guests and our crew that helped me put on KC Happy Hour, Aaron and Taylor, as always, joining us. But let's go ahead and bring in the star, one of the stars, really the star out of last weekend's show, Elio Meza. Elio, first of all, buddy, just like a lot of kids your age, I know you got school going on, you got homework, you got exams. So thank you for making the time here tonight, man. I'm sure a lot of people would love to hear from you, and I know that it means a lot that you're able to make time for us. So thank you.
No, thanks for having you. Thanks for you guys having me on here.
So let's first get into it. I know that Taylor and Aaron have a handful of questions for you. I've got some stuff that I want to ask you, but I'm going to pass it off. We'll give Aaron first on the mic here to hit you with a couple of questions and to get to know you a little bit better. So, your background, senior rookie, what start number have you been keeping track? What was last weekend and running the 125 pro classes? That was weekend number 4, if I'm not mistaken, right? We count PK with ROK for the winter tour, USPKS, and I think SCUSA as well. Or did you do ROK? So I guess that'd be
ROK,
5.
yeah. So it'll be no, we didn't do SCUSA, so it's only 4.
Only 4, which makes it all the more impressive to get the pole on your start, to win some heat races, to run up front. Aaron, let's go to you, man. I know you got some questions for him. Why don't we hit him up and grill him a little bit?
Yeah. So, again, thank you for coming on to the show. First off, we've talked before about how you are not exactly the biggest budget operation in the pits. You guys came out to the second round of the ROK Florida Winter Tour at PK on a box stock ROK GP motor, and you guys were on like a 2014 or something Tony kart, not new equipment by any stretch of the imagination. How do you feel like you're able to overcome that financial restriction that you have competing against guys spending so much more money? What do you think is giving you the ability to keep up with them, since they are, possibly doubling or tripling your budget on weekend?
Yeah, so for me, ever since I've been karting, we haven't always had the best equipment, especially since we really got into it around 2017 when I was in mini SWIP. We always didn't have the best equipment. It was always really, back then, me and my dad. So we're always, starting from scratch, not the best equipment. And still now to this day, we don't have the best equipment, like you said. But I just think being from a young age of not having as much as everyone else has made me work harder. And I guess it's become a little bit more normal as I grow up, because I don't really compare myself to anyone else anymore. Like back then I used to be like, oh man, look at all those big trailers, look at all those new chassis. But now you come to realize that, if you work hard enough for it, you can be just as fast as anyone else.
Yeah, I think it's really an inspiration to a lot of drivers that feel like they can't come out and compete at the highest level. Not to say that, you guys are running an extremely cheap operation, or you're spending $50 a weekend to get out there and run or anything like that. But it is very impressive. And part of that is you ran K Junior last year. You didn't run Tag Senior. You ran Tag Junior. Sorry, you ran 2 starts in 125 last year? 1 or 2 starts in Junior?
I did two.
Yeah.
It was in NOLA and then Indiana.
Okay, yeah. And so that transition from K Junior, 100cc Junior, to 125 Pro Senior racing, was there a culture shock moving into that category almost right away, right off the bat?
So my first kind of debut was at PK in the ROK GP class. And there, I didn't notice too much of a difference. I noticed that it was a lot more spaced out than I thought it was going to be, kind of the competition. But then when I noticed the culture shock was the Orlando opening round of USPKS. Everyone was so much more aggressive, and it was kind of just like, whoa, you kind of had to take a step back and like take it all in. But no, that was really my first moment that I realized the aggression level was a lot higher. Not necessarily people taking each other out. There were a few guys like that, but just overall driving a lot harder, defending a lot more. And I just kind of had to learn from that, especially this past weekend in Texas, a lot more aggressive than I thought drivers were going to be. So I had to, step up my game, but it's kind of helped me learn from that and also step up my aggressive level, like I said. Not necessarily taking people out, but just making sure that I defend a lot more and fight a lot harder for my position.
And then when you're talking about, the aggression level going up, there's drivers that are making more moves, stuff like that. And we've had a lot of discussion here about respect between drivers and drivers not having respect for each other and whatnot. Did you feel like there was a difference in the respect given between K Junior and X30 Senior, 125 Senior, where there was either more or less respect given, and was there any difference between the two of those categories? Not in terms of necessarily like the pace of the field or how competitive it was, but just how the drivers raced each other?
So it was a bit more aggressive. I felt like in the X30 quite a bit. When I drove K Senior, when I moved up, I felt like I had quite a bit of respect from all the drivers. They pretty much raced me cleanly. In X30, they raced me cleanly as well, but I felt like they raced me a lot harder than other drivers on the field. And that, again, I think comes with the respect kind of aspect, I guess. But it just made me realize that I had to drive them a little bit cleaner than other drivers would. So that way, I guess I could earn their respect. But no, not much.
All right, Taylor, you got anything for him?
Yeah, and in regards to what happened this past weekend, we saw you win heat race number 1. Heat 2, of course, was a little bit difficult. Was that possibly the way where you learned of how to balance out that aggression, but also just racing hard and clean and seeing how the other drivers race you hard and clean? Because we saw you drip back a little bit in Heat 2, but then in Heat 3 and in the finals, it was a totally different outlook as far as doing the same thing like you did in Heat Race 1.
Yeah, so definitely in Heat 2 was really the moment where I learned quite a bit, because especially once I got passed by the first 2 guys, I mean, I kind of had to take a step back because of how hard they were driving me, and I had to gather myself up a little bit. It was almost like I was getting shoved around. But, it took me quite a bit to kind of get back in a rhythm in that race, and I think that really hurt me to keep moving forward, because I started moving forward, but just way too late in that race. So I learned from going into Heat 3 that I had to be a lot more aggressive on the start, where I had to defend a lot more, go a lot closer to the bottom of the track. And, it did help quite a bit.
Now, moving into, yourself. I mean, Elio, I think there's a lot of things that a lot of kids coming up in mini, micro, and junior can learn from you. And for me personally, like, I feel like you've got one of the most positive outlooks at the racetrack, good, bad, or ugly, when you have a race weekend. And that's not everybody. Most of the time, this sport is a struggle. It's very rare when you can win, even after the main event in X30 when you finish 5th. I mean, you still got kind of bullied a little bit in the first couple laps and fought back, and the speed was good enough that you're able to get to the top 5, to the podium. But your mindset, man, I'm curious, was there ever a point as you were coming up that, I mean, you said now you don't compare yourself much to the other kids, maybe the haves or the have-nots, or where you're at of, the comfort of a bigger 10 or having a lot of engines or having more seat time, which is a constant thing that a lot of drivers compare themselves to. But you're positive, man. You're a positive kid. You're always smiling. I rarely see you in a bad mood when I'm saying hi to you. And I say hi to you almost every weekend that you're there, even last year in junior. And granted, it's easier to be happy when things are going good, when you're winning the USPKS championship last year, when you're running good this week, when you got family around. But is that just who you are? Was there a point when you kind of started to take the sport in a different light and just be happy to be a part of it? Like, have you always been this positive, really happy-go-lucky kid whenever – you were coming up?
I mean, I have to say a lot of it is just kind of how I came up from the sport. So a lot of it was from my dad. So he's been my mechanic since day one, since we started racing. And a lot of the times, especially when I moved up from mini to junior, it was quite a big difference. Obviously, it's a full size, you're getting used to the new engines and stuff. But there I felt I got pushed around quite a bit on my first year. And, I was disappointed a lot because I felt like I wasn't doing as good as I could have been doing. But my dad always reminded me that it's easy to be, in the happy spirits when everything's going your way. But, it shows your character when things aren't going your way, how you respond. So I always remember that and try and be as positive as I can, because I feel like the more positive you are with something, I feel like the better outcomes you're going to have. So just kind of that with my dad, and just kind of the experience I've had through racing, and especially on the track, I feel like my mindset has changed quite a bit. Before, if I felt like I was falling back too far, I'd start to overdrive pretty hard and then just fall back even worse. But now I feel like I keep my composure pretty well. So a lot of it comes with experience, and then a lot of it comes from my dad as well.
And, there's not a lot of guys. I know I look back and, at the races I was able to do with my dad, and my dad was unable to kind of keep coming with me to the racetrack when I was about 16 or 17. I've got 4 younger siblings. They're all doing different sports. And, I wish that not only could I have raced more, but I could have had my dad around for more races when I was really starting to hit my stride a bit as I got a bit older. Do you think about that? I mean, I don't think a lot of kids take that into consideration early on, that how special it is that your dad's able to be with you every step of the way. Is that something that, you at this age can even appreciate, that you're able to spend all this time with your dad, traveling the country, going up against the best in the nation, the best in the world? Like, do you think about that how cool that is that you're able to have your dad with you every step of the way?
I think about it quite a bit, because then, you look at a lot of other drivers and you see them with, either they have a paid mechanic or a mechanic that they hire, and you kind of look around and they're on the grid and they're not really talking to their mechanics or anything. But, having my dad there with me all the time, it's just, I feel like it makes me a lot more comfortable when I'm going to the track or being at the track, because I can be myself. We work together pretty well. Sometimes we butt heads, but in the end, we sort it out. But yeah, I'm pretty grateful to have him by my side.
And you talk about composure. Obviously, Charlie's Blaine. I heard one dad describe him as kind of like Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid, of how quiet and introverted and reserved he is, and for the most part, like almost always a pretty mellow tone. I have to imagine you've run with Charlie for the last few years, that you've probably seen that as well, and it's rubbed off on you. That guy is very center of the road. He's not an overly outwardly emotional guy. Do you think that's probably factored in a little bit too, of you being able to stay neutral, at a lot of race weekends when you're under the helmet?
Oh, for sure. I mean, especially because we ran with them in 2019, so kind of my last years in mini. But it was really when we moved up to junior, where you kind of had to start from scratch with everything, that he really taught me quite a bit of not only the driving, but kind of, the strategy on the track and just your mindset of how to handle things in certain situations. So a lot of the props also goes to him as well. Yeah.
And I mean, the last thing I got for you, man. I'm sure there's no better weekend you could have scripted besides any racing at Katy, to have your breakout weekend where you're really, not that you hadn't already made a name for yourself, winning junior national titles last year, winning a junior state title last year, and having a podium in your first 125 race at PK, but to put it on the pole in as competitive of a field at the top end as we see at Supernats, to win KA, to win heat races in the pro class at a race that's near your home, where you got family and friends there. I mean, you had a cheering section every interview. Like,
Yeah.
I bet that was that both like a blessing and a curse, like both almost like super cool to have them there and pump you up, but probably some added pressure to go and perform in all of them when you were to put your helmet down. Because I think for any kid to have a crowd like that behind you, you almost feel like you got to perform for them, right?
I didn't really think of it as a curse. A lot more of a blessing for sure, especially since we were back in my hometown racing. But I think that's also a little bit of my mindset. When I go out on the track, I kind of clear everything out and just hone in on the racing aspect. So I don't really think of, who's watching, but more of just dial it in. And then when I go across the finish line, I go like, wow, yeah, all my family's here. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's got to be just the coolest feeling. And speaking of that racetrack, right? Like, you know, y- you've been fast. There's no question. You've had some good runs already this year in senior, but you were a level above this weekend than any other part of the year. So if you look back on speed sports, granted it's going to be a little while before we head back there. The next time any major race will be the TSR race in the fall, but what around that racetrack, does it suit your style? Do you adapt your style to that racetrack? I mean, from what every driver says, it's a lot of flowing, a lot of momentum carrying corners. You're not hitting curbs, you're not flying in the air. But what if you could break down like both the track of what suited you, what part of it was the key of being as fast as you were? Because even though it was a fifth and a first, it was, I think, first if not top three level speed in both by far.
Yeah, I mean, I've driven that track pretty much since it came out, or once they built it. So back when I was when I was in my mini Swift days, all the way till now. So I had a lot of track time there, which benefited me quite a bit. But I think what really helped me was just the amount of laps I did there. Like I said, just the amount of consistency I had throughout the weekend of my laps. it benefited me. It benefited me quite a bit throughout the weekend.
For sure. Well, we know you've got a busy schedule this year. I talked with your dad a little bit, obviously, and yourself at the end of the day Sunday. You're looking for funding, hopefully, to try and complete that Lucas Oil Racing School series through the year. You got selected for the scholarship for a partial season. You need a little more budget to complete that. So that's kind of on the table, but also a little bit of a question mark. But on the karting side as well, you've got a lot of events. So where can everybody see you here through the rest of the year doing your thing?
Yeah, so we're going to be finishing off the USPKS series. We won't be running SCUSA or the Stars, but I'll also be doing the Southwest Regional Cup that they started up in Texas, the regional series. And then as well as we're going to try and, like you said, get some funding for the Lucas Oil stuff.
Well, you're a super humble kid, man. I know I've told you this a bunch. I'm proud of you. I know you've got. I was telling you, I'm sure you've started to feel it now, getting home from the weekend, the outpour of support. But you got a lot of fans rooting for you, and you're definitely a right kid for a lot of guys to get behind, to root for in racing, because you got a good head on your shoulders, buddy. So thanks again for the time, man, and we look forward to seeing you at the next big show.
Thank you, guys.
All right. With Elio tapped on out of here, we'll let him pop on out of the studio. We've got a lot more coming. Another breakout star from last weekend was Tahlon Yockel in Pro Shifter. He's getting set to get after it again in Pro Stars Shifter here this weekend with the Stars Championship Series. Want to chat with him on the other side of the darlings of the pro classes that started to make a name for themselves. And then again, as always, guys, the Ask Questions, the Q&A that comes to the rest of the show continues on through this show. So any other questions you guys want to continue to send on in, I'll get to them. We'll answer them all, good, bad, or ugly. Everything goes here on this show as it always has been. So we'll take this commercial break. Talon will join us after the break. And then at the end of the show, we'll touch on a lot of big news and all the questions you guys have sent in so far.
Kart Store USA is a kart parts supplier that racers and retailers can count on when they need reliable advice and service. We focus on servicing all racers with honesty and pride while maintaining customer satisfaction. We carry a full stock of Kart Republic and Tony Kart chassis, as well as IAMI and Vortex ROK engines. We've also got a host of other parts available and in stock, such as products from Rev Performance Materials, Jekko Racing Seats, and more. We have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, and on top of that, if your order exceeds $200, shipping is on us. Check out all we have to offer today by visiting us online at kartstore-usa.com.
Don't settle for a national engine builder. Take care of yourself with an international one. SRP Engines is a global industry leader in engine services, specializing in engine formulas such as KZ, OK, OKJ, and Mini 60. SRP Engines is the engine of choice for Magic Kart USA and helped power North America's #1 ranked pro shifter driver AJ Myers to the 2021 SuperKarts USA Pro Tour National Championship. SRP Engines can also service any spec engine class of your choice, including IAMI and ROK divisions. However, if you're looking for the absolute choice when it comes to KZ shifter engines, there is nobody better. For more information, contact Amr Sanada at srp-engines.com. KC Happy Hour is proudly presented by the ROK Sonoma Karting Championship, presented by Cameron Race Promotions, the most competitive Northern California karting series. Featuring a 2-day format with practice on Saturday and racing on Sunday, multiple track configurations, and a massive prize structure including tickets to Rock Vegas, race car test opportunities, and race rewards. ROK Sonoma is the training ground of multiple national karting champions each year and race car champions as well. Featuring a full ROK Cup USA class structure with each race weekend streamed live via YouTube, it's a series you cannot miss. For more info, check us out online at zanzarukarting.com. All right, guys, welcome back. For everybody tuning into the show, we just had a great interview with Elio Meza, the one of the many kids that really broke out onto the scene as if he hadn't already. We've got Talon Yockel joining us for the very first time. We always talk and always bring in the big three, but Talon, it's time for a different Magic driver into the spotlight. So first of all, buddy, thanks for the time. Appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you inviting me.
So,
Really excited.
yeah, man. So let's get into it. This weekend, you're on home turf at GoPro, I know, or at Trackhouse Motorplex in Mooresville.
I'm getting
That's
used
a
to
ding.
it. So. I'm still getting
Yeah, I'm
used
sure
to
it's got to be. Yeah, I feel like you probably are in the basement over there. I mean, you've about set up shop and lived at this racetrack the last. How many years have you been living over in North Carolina now, Talon?
it. 4 years now. Yeah, March 17th I moved here, so 4 years. So it's in my backyard, only 10 minutes away from there.
I got you. So I know Aaron and Taylor have a couple questions. I'll hit some here at the end. Aaron, I'll pass it off to you to hit him with it a few here at the beginning. So let's go ahead and grill him.
All right, yeah. Well, first off, you are already a Star Championship Series winner. You won at GoPro last year, and you're starting to fight in the top 5 at USPKS. You finished 5th in I think the 3rd heat on Saturday, and you were right around that position for the entire weekend. And you came from a lot of single speed stuff, running Yamaha and X30. How steep was that learning curve for you to really give people an idea of how much that learning curve, how difficult these shifter carts are compared to a regular cart?
Oh man, it was basically just starting from zero, starting from ground one again. Shifter carts compared to X30, it's completely different. You know, front brakes, gearbox, different. You gotta run different lines as well into the corner. So I had to relearn everything. Thankfully, I had Magic and AJ to teach me the right stuff, so I wasn't out there just staying slow. He taught me really quick.
And does that translate to the racecraft too? Are you making different racecraft decisions because you have front brakes, more horsepower, and a gearbox versus you would in an X30?
Oh yeah, it's completely different racecraft. You have to relearn how to pass. Like I said, the front brakes, it makes it incredibly difficult compared to X30 where you can just throw it in there. Here, you know, like Texas, you saw over the weekend, Danny, AJ, they basically just had to throw it in there at like maximum pace, 110%. So it's completely different. I'm still learning the passing aspect and, you know, just slowly getting there. But yeah, you had to completely relearn everything.
And so your first season in shifter was last year, right? You didn't do any shifter racing before last year. So you started out.
I haven't touched one.
Okay, yeah. So you started out
I haven't touched one.
Yeah. So you started out in Stars, which was at that point last year like a super regional. It was a very competitive class. How did that feel for you, jumping into probably the most competitive, not national scene of shifter karting, having never been in the category before?
I was definitely a little bit nervous, which usually my dad calls me the Iceman because I don't get nervous before races. But my first race, I definitely had a little bit of the cold sweats going on. But other than that, I was confident at the same time because I had the best guys behind me, Magic, AJ, Palmer, building the engine. So, like, if I couldn't do anything with that package first year in, then obviously the nerves got to me. But you saw how the season went. It went pretty smooth, especially first race. So, getting the hang of it throughout the first couple of races last year. But, yeah, I definitely had the nerves going.
I know.
Well, it sounds like it trained you for
Aaron's
media
got
pretty
something
well.
Taylor's got something here real quick, Aaron. Taylor, what'd you have?
Yeah, so the question I wanted to bring out to you, Talon, is speaking of your teammate and who you work with, of course, you are teammates to AJ Myers as well as with the Magic Kart USA team. What is the team dynamic of learning from basically one of the top shifter kart drivers in the country and being able to take some of that information that he teaches you to apply to how you're able to improve upon your racing with these shifter karts?
You know, AJ's a really smart guy, so sometimes when he's coaching me, it's a little bit hard to translate, but he's been working with me relentlessly, and he's a really good coach. So he definitely got through to me, but he's just like looking at the graphs throughout the whole series, like the whole season. Sorry, he just taught me everything from just going in the corner, carrying too much speed at mid corner. Like he, like the team dynamic, he wants me to be able to beat him, but obviously he don't want me to beat him. So it's sorry, blanking out a little bit, but he is like trying to get me there definitely, but he don't want me to beat him. So
Yeah,
he wants two fast guys at once, you know?
I mean, so like there's this. I feel like shifter again, like you said, it's so different. The racing's so different. The dynamics different. The lapping is different. And we've got AJ, Marion, Danny. We used to have Jake French. We don't have him as he's retired. We have Giorgio kind of coming up. On the West Coast, you have Kyle Wick and Jacob Gulick's really close and getting there. Hunter Pickett is right there. But from AJ as a coach, right? I'm talking about like tough to translate. Sometimes the most talented drivers are some of the, not the worst coaches, but not the best, because what comes to him naturally after all these years doesn't come to you naturally, right? Is there points when he's like walking you through of like how he's able to do something and it just doesn't click because you're like, I don't even understand how he's able to do what he's able to do? I'm sure there's got to be some of that, right?
Yeah. When I first started my first season, trying to relearn everything, it was definitely really difficult, but if there's a will, there's a way. So I had the will to do it. And eventually we like discussed it, like after Orlando, after USPKS, like different ways he could coach me so it translates better, which obviously at Texas I had the pace. It was only me and him under the tent. So both me and him were less stressed, and it was actually a pretty chill weekend. And we were just working together really good, like bread and butter.
And we talked with Elio about working with his dad. Your dad is, he's got a lot of energy. I love Marty. He's a fun dude. But you both are also pretty nonchalant guys, right? Like talk with Elio. Elio's always happy. I don't ever see you really worked up too much, at the racetrack. You're a pretty easygoing dude. And you're able to have your dad around. Is that a lot of like kind of how you and your dad work, that, week in, week out? Like, are you setting a lot of goals? I don't feel like you put a lot of pressure on yourself, even when you've been performing really, really well. Like you seem like you've been able to keep a kind of neutral mindset every weekend. Where does that come from? And do you think about that, of constantly trying to mentally reset and, take each session as it comes?
My dad's my biggest supporter and he's my mechanic, so he obviously cares how I do. So sometimes it gets a little bit stressful, but I just don't really let it show if I am stressed out, because it don't really help out on track. But we're pretty nonchalant about things. It is what it is, like if something don't go right, especially recently, we've definitely calmed down on things. But me and him, we've been working together ever since I started karting when I was 13 years old. And it's been like that ever since. So we know how to work together. We know how to stay calm around each other when stuff don't really go to plan. But we're a good team together. I wouldn't really trade anything for it at this point.
I got to interrupt myself here really quick as well. Ken Schilling in our Facebook comments mentioned Billy Musgrave. Yes, 100%. Totally left him out in that quick comment. Billy is a beast. So I want to give some love to Billy Musgrave as one of the top national shifter car guys as well, and building his own go-kart, which we're going to touch on a little bit later in the Ask Questions. But back to your dad too, right? So for a lot of you watching the show, we have a lot of new karters that are constantly kind of starting to tune into Kart Chaser content and to see us. You got in late. I mean, you can admit it as late to the game, midway through your junior age ranks. And you caught up to the point that even by the end of your X30 junior days, that you were starting to be pretty fast at tracks that you were starting to really get comfortable at. Your original home in Pittsburgh, then at Mooresville, you started to get really, really good. And then right as you were starting to touch senior, that's when you jumped over to shifter. So it's kind of been a reset where on that original path you were going on, I think you would have easily been one of our top 10, top 15, top 20 guys that we talk about every week in X30. But you guys started so late that your way of catching up was making up for laps. And I remember having this conversation with your dad about it's not the number of years you've been doing this. It's the number of races. I mean, I've in my time racing done a couple races a year where kids that were able to drive every other weekend were able to race every weekend, in a year or two could get to my level, pretty easily because it came down to that. So, I know for you guys, it was like, well, we're going to jump in and we're just going to test as many days as you're able, afternoon after school, come in every weekend, and we're just going to pound 1,000,000 laps. Was that something you guys decided on your own? How did you get to that? Because it's obviously worked out. I mean, you're now running on the cusp of getting into that top shifter guy conversation. But even then, you were already there with X30 Junior at the end of your days there, and in single speed stuff. So did you come into the sport and you're like, yeah, we're just going to drive a lot? Or did you talk to people and did that kind of say, you know what, we just got to go out and pound laps? Because you went about it where it wasn't, we're going to run to every race. We're not going to buy at the biggest tent and just run races with the highest, best, equipment. We're going to go in and we're going to practice 1,000,000 laps. Where did that idea come from?
So that comes from my dad's mindset of racing BMX, racing motocross, and racing sport bikes professionally. So all the two-wheel stuff, if you watch MotoGP, it doesn't come down to what team you're on. It just depends on how much you know your bike. So like how much you practice. He said we need to practice if we need to get to the level of like these guys at the front. So I remember at my first nationals in X30, we didn't really know anything, and he would put us in the front of the grid during practice with, like, during that time, Zach Holden, JP Southern, like, all the top guys during that time. So, yeah, he just said, watch their lines, watch what they're doing, learn what they're doing. So I started learning what people were doing just by practicing and then figuring out my own stuff because I was a privateer for so many years. Now I'm finally on a team. So definitely takes the stress off nowadays, but I still practice as much as I used to.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, you're at the track quite a bit, still pounding laps even as you're at, and I feel like it's something that you're gonna continue to do. You look back on it, like I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would feel like the biggest benefit you got from practicing all the time is you get to that point as a driver when you start to become a guy racing at the front, hitting your marks is almost subconscious. You're not even thinking about it at that point. It's pure muscle memory. Whereas when you don't test a lot, when you're kind of green to the sport, you're having to concentrate on just hitting your braking marker at the right point, turning in at the right point, gas at the right point. And granted, you're relearning a lot of that stuff now with shifter over the last year and a half. But would you agree? Like, what's the biggest takeaways from testing even on old engines, old rubber, not paying attention to the stopwatch or the micron? Like, is that the biggest thing that I feel like you probably get a pretty good feel from the seat of the pants on setup too. But to me, those I feel like are the biggest qualities you can get from just laps on laps every single week.
Every time I'm out at Trackhouse, every time I'm out at Trackhouse, I'm just trying different lines, honestly. I'm just seeing what works, what doesn't work, because like if you run the same thing so many times, then you just don't learn anything. So once you try something different, you learn, oh, this could be better on the entry, but I need to translate it into my old traditional line. So you're completely correct though. Like it becomes secondhand nature at that point. And yeah, at this rate though, we're trying to get AJ to get a practice chassis so we both can practice and learn from each other. Because yeah, I'm not as fast as AJ now. It could probably go up for controversy sooner or later, who knows? But yeah, he will definitely be able to teach me different stuff around GoPro. But once you do 1,000,000 laps around the same track, it kind of just, you don't really learn anything. So Andrew actually made a drill for me. He made me practice the whole day one-handed, just to remain calm because I have a tendency of overdriving a lot.
Did you ever do that in single speed stuff where you had to practice with one hand? Because when I was working with a driver last year, I told them, I actually took duct tape, taped their hand to their leg, and told them, you're going this entire practice session with your left hand, just to like calm their hands down a little bit and get them to stop being so heavy on the wheel. Is that something you tried in single speed too, or is that just something that Andrew threw at you one day and was like, you have to do this for the entire practice day?
No, it was completely new to me. He just threw it at me the one day. But in single speed, I was actually relatively smooth. Never really moved in the seat. I kind of leaned in a little bit, which if you watch me, you'll see my head will be like tilted in a little bit. So need to work on neck strength a little bit. But no, Andrew just threw that out to me, and it helps me stay calm when I practice. Don't overdrive. Don't get any bad habits. And it works. I can run a pretty decent pace one-handed, but I'd rather not race like that, obviously.
Yeah. And we talk about shifter being so grueling physically, right? I mean, the fitness to last for a whole race is pretty heavy. But, you know, do you yourself, not every driver is in the gym religiously, you know? I mean, some guys are, some guys aren't. I mean, I think by driving enough, you can make up for it. Do you yourself have any kind of gym regimen or training regimen during the week where you try and run a little bit, cycle, or stay active, or are you driving enough that you're able to kind of still be fit in the go-kart just by being in the go-kart that much?
Well, you know, I do still practice a lot just so I don't get the rust on me, as people would say. I always like to have myself stay sharp, but I actually picked up a new hobby. I actually do paintballing on the weekend, which is good cardio, and you're sweating, like you're just dripping sweat with the Carolina weather. But yeah, I've also been doing 100 push-ups a day. I've been running a little bit, but I work throughout the day, so it's a little bit hard to fit in the schedule. But I've definitely been trying to be consistent on, you know, getting in shape, maybe gaining a few more pounds, which from Orlando to Texas, I gained 10 pounds. So I consider that a pretty good increase. So hopefully I gain more weight so I don't have as much lead on the seat, because those 10 pounds, it made the cart handle way better than usual. It responded better. It was more predictable. So I definitely saw the change just from, you know, putting the effort in off track.
Is it as big as everybody says it is, of the jump from even single speed to shifter and how more physical it is on your body? Like, can you think back, being as recent as a year ago, of your first time really driving it? Like, is it as brutal as everyone says it is for you?
I mean, I'm not much for complaining. I'll never show that I'm tired to competitors or anyone on the team. But yeah, you could tell the difference in your first like month or two, but considering the consistency of me practicing almost like once a week, twice a week, because the track's only 10 minutes away from my house, yeah, it beats you up. Your ribs, your tailbone, my ribs and tailbone just look like big prunes at the end of the weekend sometimes. But it's just part of the game, you know. X30 compared to shifter just feels like baby stuff. KZ definitely whoops your butt a little bit.
Well, just like with Elio, you got a busy schedule. We know you're racing this week. So calling your shot, are we defending the title for the night fight? Are we running it back here with a bigger, more competitive field?
You see, Vincenzo's on that Maranello cart now with Josh, so they're going to be sharing data. So I would like to make it 2 in a row, you know, but they're going to be tough competitors. I'm definitely not going to knock them at all. They're fast. They've always been fast, always been around me. So I'm ready for the heat. I'm definitely ready for them to be really close to times or even faster.
And lastly, your schedule for the rest of the year, right? You've run almost every every major so far. USPKS the first 2 rounds. I think you were at the SCUSA round in Orlando as well, right? So
No,
is that what the rest
there.
of your – oh, not that one? All right, I'm mistaken.
No,
so
I
the rest of
didn't
your
get to
year,
that one.
what do you got? Are you running Pro Tour at Utah? Or are you just doing stars in USPKS? Supernats, I'm sure, is probably something you want to get back to. What's the year look like for Talon Yakul?
I'm doing the full season and stars in USPKS. So hopefully, you know, get up in the top 5 in standings at some point in USPKS. I'm going for that championship in stars this year because I was so close last year in Cincinnati. For SCUSA, I'm not running the whole season. Obviously, I missed Orlando already. I'm probably going to do Summer Nats and definitely looking at Vegas. So hopefully Vegas, you know, it's the big show, and I messed up my frame there and had to re-weld it. So I want a cleaner run this time, actually qualify this time, instead of starting in the back every heat race.
I hear you. Well, Talon, we're looking forward to having you here at the Trackhouse Motorplex night flight. We'll keep everything tabbed up on you. Make sure you wake up early tomorrow. We got media day for KZ and OKN. I got a post about that here after the show. But thanks as always for the time, buddy. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you guys. See you tomorrow, Xander.
See you then, my man. All right. With Tahlon Yockel stepping on out of the studio, everyone, that leads us to our final segment that I know a lot of our viewership peaked pretty early on for, and I think is a big reason that it's going to stay around. Big news out of USPKS with a big race director tech bulletin. A lot of questions you guys want to have aired on the airwaves for this show. That's all coming up right after this.
Ready to go racing along the Gulf Coast? Karting the Coast is a family-oriented regional series that covers Mississippi and Louisiana. Its 2023 schedule consists of 10 races spread amongst Finish Line Performance Karting in Biloxi, Mississippi, and NOLA Motorsports Park in New Orleans. To find out more, visit coastalkarting.com. From 4-stroke to 100cc to 125cc and beyond, Technokart USA has a winning option for you. Based out of Des Plaines, Illinois, Technokart USA offers both chassis designed to win in all divisions of North American karting and a top-level race support program at the US Pro Kart Series, Route 66 Sprint Series, select Cup Karts North America races, and both the ROK Vegas and SCUSA Super Nationals. Podiums, wins, and championships are waiting for you whenever you're ready to get on a Technokart. For more information, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TechnokartUSA.
All right, everybody, welcome back here to KC Happy Hour. Myself, Xander Clements, alongside me, Taylor and Aaron. We've got our Ask Xander segment. So a lot of you guys submitted questions. We had comments from our YouTube clips last week, a laundry list of stuff to go through. Aaron, I know you've got it laid out for the segment, so go ahead, lead us into it. What do we got?
Well, before we get to the questions, I thought we would want to cover the news coming out of USPKS. There was a big announcement today that the tech bulletin, or the race director's bulletin, that was released by USPKS, had a bit of information in there, clarifying some of the rules, some of the changes that they've made. And they also announced that they are doing some bans and suspensions now. And this has a big impact on the rest of karting in the country, because as we've seen before, as was announced earlier, these bans at USPKS also translate to SCUSA and ROK Cup as well. Sorry for the train behind me. Obviously, didn't plan on that. So first off, with the probation period here, Alessandro Di Tullio and Diego Ramos were caught trying to undo a pushback bumper that they got in Orlando. At the time, that wasn't a full weekend DQ. So they were just put to the back of the grid for the results for that race, and they were allowed to keep going. Because of that incident, they are now on probation for 1 year as of May 1st. So 1 year from May 1st, they will be off probation, assuming nothing else happens. Ryan Norberg was involved in an incident in Orlando. He has been put on probation for a year. And the big news was Zachary Clayman DeMello has, according to USPKS, had multiple issues and repeated the same issues. So he has been suspended for 1 year from USPKS, SCUSA, and ROK Cup. This is pretty big. Xander, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that was a lot. First of all, the Orlando stuff didn't get publicized. Norberg on probation for the contact with Zach at the end of that main. Ale and Diego for pushing back their bumper from probation is a pretty wide term. So they also got Roman Haynes as a mechanic for bad-mouthing the series on social media. They do have a clause for all of it. In fact, with every probation clause, they had a rule listed as to what was it according to. We haven't covered the Zach and Ryan incident on here extensively. We've kind of recapped it. We brought Ryan on to talk about something else. I had Zach on my personal podcast before a lot of the stuff went down that aired right after the PK Race Pork race in Florida Winter Tour in February is when we recorded it. And between the two of them, it had been brewing really a lot more with Zach on to Ryan through last year. So first of all, kudos to the series for standing strong. I was mistaken and misspoken about a month or two ago when we were talking about the NAKL when I said that the series had put out a master statement that they were all going to be in lockstep on banning or suspending guys. We hadn't heard or seen anything from it. There was one dad that did get suspended from all three, for a suspension from one, for fighting. They said that clause was still enacted, and that was also the beginning of the spur of the NAKL. The beginnings of that was that initial statement. And in the case with Zach and Ryan, again, Zach had kind of mouthed off about the frustration of RPG dominating, had insinuated cheating with them through the interviews. So that kind of puts you on the series radar. Then we go to Orlando, and he had already not thought so much on Ryan. Ryan had not thought so much on him. He starts messing with Ryan on the racetrack. Ryan puts him in the wall. The officials missed it. They admitted they missed it. That's what put them both on put Ryan on probation. Then Zach went and cleaned Ryan out at SCUSA practice on Wednesday, which was track run practice, but the series officials were there. That put Zach on probation, and the probation was mainly about the two of them coming together. It wasn't about anything else. And then they had an incident coming together where Zach pushed Ryan off the racetrack at Houston, and then it goes. So it's the first instance of drivers really getting the heat from the series, of stuff crossing series bounds, which I think is good. And I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this before the show, or even this week. I've been doing some personal journals on my personal profile Facebook page and LinkedIn, talking about stuff we've learned from inside of running this company and doing stuff with the sport. And one of them that I literally had, it's still sitting in my drafts, of managing drama and what's the right and the wrong bounds and where do we stand. And we've outlined it a lot on the show in the past, that I don't like doing it with mini, micro, junior. I don't think it's fair to do it to kids when you want to move up to an adult class, which our sport defines adult as 15 plus. So it's a little different than the rest of the world, being 18 plus in the US for anything else as a legal adult, but it is what it is. And that, there's rivalries that are good, like AJ and Marin, who, they might mouth off about each other in an interview. They might disagree on the racetrack. They might come together on the racetrack. But both of them, I think, have a mutual respect of how they want to race each other. There's no intentional takeouts. They still are cordial with each other. There's still a respect between each other. And that's a good kind of rivalry. And where it gets nasty with Zach and Ryan is a bad kind of rivalry. And Zach overstepped the bounds in the series' eyes. So I want to say kudos to the series for stepping up. This is the first time really of any series publicizing major penalties. And I got to give a lot of the kudos to that to Blake, to the race director for USPKS. We touched on it a couple weeks ago coming into it, because there's a perception that these series are lazy or lackadaisical. They don't call a lot of penalties, and they do. And they're posted on their bulletin next to the results. You can look through my laps. You can see the penalties at the bottom. We forget about it because they don't broadcast it to the world that their drivers suck or that they call a lot of penalties, but they do call them. But it's a jump in the shark, because and I think that thankfully the reception on the social media and what they've seen in the messages, and I'm sure the phone calls and texts they probably privately have received, have been mostly positive from what I can tell. And that's a good sign for everyone following the sport, that the majority of the people involved applaud a series that's willing to step up and make those penalties. Stars is not part of the NAKL and is not part of this 3-step joint alliance. But if you get booted out of a Stars race, which has happened to a couple of parents for bad behavior, that goes to all NKA affiliated series and clubs, and the same from the bottom up as well. So this stuff happens. It's not new. It's not totally groundbreaking. What is groundbreaking is a series putting out a bulletin, announcing it to the world, putting the guys on blast, saying what they're doing. And the good part is, in this case, that it was just the guys in the adult classes that the guys put on blast, because I'm always touchy about the parents. From a personal liability standpoint, I'm very scared of many and micro junior parents coming after us for announcing anything on their kids, which again is just it just scares the bejesus out of me to push those classes into the limelight, because with the positive congratulations like what we got to see for Elio comes the backlash when you do something wrong. And I don't think it's fair for a kid at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old to pay for penalties on a world stage or a global internet stage. that can happen on a live stream. Granted, the races are live stream, but it's just not promoted by us in the same degree as the senior class. And I reiterate that a lot. So I think, kudos to the series. I think for sure it was crossing a line. It was going too far. And, I don't want to sound two-faced or hypocritical on that point, because we haven't had Zach on happy hour. We've done fun clips with Zach. We've joked about it. We've done fun clips with Ryan. And it's backfired in a bit in a way on us. We've had Ryan even on the show last year who would tease him about how good their power was, about how good their engines were, about how good their program was, about how dominating it was. We would joke that he'd be cheating, and someone would watch this show, and then they would go to Raleigh or to the series, to Mike Ralston, his team owner, or to the series, and then they would say through the telephone line of one guy to one guy to one guy that we're saying that he's cheating or someone. And, it was a learning experience for me, realizing the reach that we had and the influence that we had, that, I don't want to spur that kind of bad stuff. And so while it's been fun to tease about it, when it crosses a line and you do have intentional crashing and stuff really getting onto the racetrack, it takes the professionalism down. So, the series made the right decision. It ultimately does fall on the series to make those hard decisions. I've had a lot of talks with them about everything that we do and how we promote and what we push, what we don't push, and stuff like that. So, I mean, from what I understand, again, what burned Zach, it wasn't like he went and destroyed a guy or potentially hurt someone. What he did was he had an action against Ryan, and the original thing that put him on probation was an action against Ryan, and that's what spurred the year suspension. In the same way for DeTulio and Ramos, granted they're on probation, Ryan as well, where if they do something overly egregious, like intentionally crash somebody, mouth off in the wrong way, again, like the mechanic Roman that got put on probation for mouthing off the series, that'll be one thing. But also, if they do the same thing they got probation on for, that's what'll trigger, I feel like the precedent for like a year suspension. So if DeTulio or Ramos get caught pushing their bumper back out at a SCUSA or a ROK or USPKS, suspend them, because it's a second offense. And so that's why the penalty went from probation to a year suspension. From what I can understand and what I would believe, and it makes sense, that Zach's initial action against Ryan on that test day at SCUSA put him on probation, and then he committed an act against Ryan. Now, where it goes from here, we just kind of wait and see. That's the luxury we have of being media and not being in the officials box of what they do. But it was a message sent. The series have been wanting to put their foot down. They've been wanting to send a message to the drivers that there's a line, you can't cross it. And this is the first of those, okay, rubber meets the road, someone's going to get burned. In this case, it was Zach. He went too far. He got burned, and what comes from it comes from it. But it is very cool to see the series in lockstep on it, cross series bounds. So that's good. And then, we talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on here. The only thing, there's a lot to come out of that press release as well, beyond just the drivers getting put on probation or suspended. They updated the rules going into Texas that, they DQ'd multiple drivers for moving their pushback out for the entire weekend. That puts them in sync with SCUSA, which was a change. And DeTulio and Ramos should consider themselves very lucky that all they got was a DQ for a session in Orlando, because now they're in the same boat as SCUSA or ROK when it comes to the pushback. But they also did say that SCUSA, in a driver's meeting at Orlando, had said that they got feedback from the teams that they were a little bit too harsh, a little bit too much into the driver's box on the penalties they called. So they said that essentially a bump and run, a light bump and run that moves one driver up the groove and gets them go, or a little bit of contact, is okay. And USPKS with Blake explicitly defined that any contact from the front bumper to improve position or to move a guy out of the way that would hurt his race is going to trigger a penalty. And what we talked about in some previous shows and a lot of social media commentary is about wanting to know specifics when it comes to race directing. And I think the big positive takeaway, even bigger than seeing that there are harsh penalties like probation and suspensions, and highlighting those guys on blast, unfortunately for their personal sake, is that Blake went in very specifics on the contact and what they will not allow at USPKS. And he said they don't want any front bumper contact initiating a pass in any kind. Really, they don't want contact of any pass. So I know we'll get to the questions later, but that was also to me a positive takeaway from it.
All right, yeah. So now we've gotten that out of the way, the big news section, all that. It's time for a Q&A presented by Mega Power Engines. And this kind of led into the first question that we wanted to cover here, which was somebody, and this is paraphrasing it. This is not the full comment or anything like that, but we don't have enough space to put that at the bottom of the screen. Basically, in a response to when we posted the clip of the FIA incident from 2 weeks ago, somebody asked, why are we so willing to point out problems at the FIA events, but won't at SCUSA? Because they thought that there were still problems at SCUSA with various issues like that, and thought that we were kind of brushing it under the rug. And we had commented a little bit on it there, but Xander, why don't you explain why the way that we reacted to the FIA incident at the European Championships is different than how we've been handling a SCUSA event or a USPKS event or a ROK Cup event so far?
Yeah. So, I mean, if we were to look at that race in that specific session, and we saw, or any of those sessions when we were digging through to find out, when we saw that clip go viral from the FIA from that KZ2 heat, if we were seeing penalties come out besides pushback bumper penalties that an official actually called, like a true penalty, I think a case can be made to kind of lighten up on those guys. But in talking with Christian last week, right, I never understood when we brought the pushback bumper penalties over here that initially everyone's feedback was, well, this is a way for the officials to get lazy. And I didn't understand that because I know all the officials here firsthand. And I know that a lot of them care. It's not a high-paying job in comparison to what mechanics and coaches and team owners and series owners can take away from a race weekend. That's not a knock on series owners. We heard from Dave Serra that in Australia, all the way to the top, it's 100% volunteer. So the fact that our officials even get paid is impressive. But these guys do care. They're hanging around the pits. Blake takes a lot of input. Bo Barfield has been taking a lot more input, especially over the last few years as he's integrated himself in the karting community. He's constantly asking for my input. The ROK Cup race directors as well are hanging around. The Stars guys they literally have both a help desk Discord person as well as Christian March, the face of Stars, essentially, being a liaison for the whole event. And Alec Coates, the race director, makes himself available. So I know our race directors over here care. I heard the notion that they don't care over there. And then you look and you see the proof in the pudding that they don't. Like that should have been a penalty, and it wasn't. So why I'm rougher on those guys over there than over here is two things. Number one, I don't know, and I haven't seen anything to prove that the guys over there legitimately care or believe that there even is a problem to begin with. So that's the first issue. At least the guys over here, I know for a fact, agree that we have problems. And that's why we're seeing a tech bulletin posted publicly, penalties, major ones posted publicly, constantly press releases, not just the top. We saw that regional press release between the Route 66 series, the Rock Island Grand Prix, the NKA. All these guys are saying, hey, we've got a problem with our racing standards. We want to fix them. Like, we're seeing it over here. I don't see anything over there. So that's the first thing. I can see that they're making efforts. And the second thing, like I said at the beginning of the show, is that I know that we have a very lucky position of working directly hand in hand with this series by producing their live streams, that we have a channel of communication that we can talk to them when I feel like there's something wrong. I mean, just before this show, I was texting Mark Coates with the owner of USPKS. I can call Tom Kutcher right now of SCUSA. I can call his daughter Alexis. I can call Bo Barfield. I can call the guys at ROK. I can call, I can go out of my RV right now and I can go drive over to the hotel and talk to the guys at Stars. So if we can solve a problem for the sport without having to put people on blast on social media, I think that's a better way. And just blasting them when they make a mistake isn't fair. I mean, we had a mistake last weekend where our internet cut out. That's never cut out before during a live stream, at least at that level, with the setup that we had in the middle of the biggest race of the weekend, the X30 main event. And it frustrated the hell out of me. I wanted to punch a wall through the tower because our viewers deserve better. Our series deserve better. The drivers deserve better. And we failed. But we have avenues where we can go and talk to those guys. And if they're not moving in the right direction, then I think it's fair to call them out. But I think the first step shouldn't be just to go and put American Series on blast if we have an option to go and talk to them. And they encourage that as well on all their posts and all their social media. Their emails are always open. Their phone lines are on. Their text lines are on. I don't know if that's the case over there, but I know that what you can see on paper is they have 0 penalties at the end of their sheet besides pushbacks. At least over here, we do have a long list of penalties beyond pushbacks in every session at every American Series. So there's efforts being made. So it's not like it's apples to apples where these guys are both bad. It's just it's a tough job to catch everything in a 46 driver field that we allow to race over here, which is a different issue that we can get onto and we've talked about before. But the effort's there. So it's not fair to put them in the same group and to go after them. If they weren't, then it would be absolutely fair. But that's really the root reason behind it.
Yeah, before we move on to the next one real quick, if anybody does doubt what Xander is saying here about the number of penalties called, go ahead and pull up Race Hero, pull up a USPKS result, and then go to the FIA website and find the race results, the PDF file. There is nothing there. Like it is a separate issue, but we'll cover that at a different time. Taylor, what's our next question here?
Well, the next question kind of goes along with what we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks right now, Xander. And this question is, do you feel like the driver's respect has still gone out the window?
So you can look up the ladder. NASCAR, I follow, as many sports as I possibly can with our schedule here. NASCAR, F1, IndyCar, they've all had run-ins. IndyCar had run-ins at the Long Beach Grand Prix with Pato Ward and Scott Dixon talking about respect and, then going to race control and talking about it. F1 had the issue this past weekend of Verstappen versus George Russell. NASCAR had the same issue that really kind of popped up at COTA and has gone on. And the real, you can't just put it on the driver's respect because, they're all here spending money or getting money spent on them to perform at every level of racing. So as a driver, you try to understand where are the lines drawn in the sand, and you go to the absolute limit of those lines to get the best result that you can. I have to, a personal applaud to, Paulie Massimino. It's talking to him today. When Norberg got spun, it wasn't spun because he got put off. He got put off by DeMello, came back on, tried to remerge. The next corner, he tried to go into the corner, and Hayden Jones and Paulie were coming in side by side, and he kind of clipped him. And Paulie went out of his way to go talk to Ryan in the scale line. And granted, Ryan was probably already dejected knowing his race was over once he got put off and fell that far back anyway. But they went and talked to each other. So I think the respect is pretty good. But there's a couple of things that factor in on the NASCAR level, right? They're talking about track design and the car design. The cars are really rigid. We've got the same kind of setup where we do have bumpers on our cars on all 4 sides where you can make contact. And so that makes contact easier to happen. And it does fall back on race directing ultimately, but I don't want to fall strictly on that crutch. I think we fostered a pretty good level of respect here. I think all the drivers are in lockstep of wanting to race respectfully. So I think the respect is there. What'll happen is, what's good for it is having the tech bulletin like this. The series are in. I think the drivers are calling for it. And it's there in the series hands. And then, but it's not one side gets the ball and the other side gets the ball. Like the series makes the call and then it goes back to the drivers. It's both. The series made their move, and now the drivers have to move with them. Going back on, again, what was really cool about Blake was he really outlined what he didn't like and what he liked and what was okay and what wasn't okay in that tech bulletin. If you have all that outlined and then you go to the drivers and you clear it with them, you're like, hey, how do you want to race? How do you guys want to race? And I think that the drivers are all, at least the majority at the top in the adult classes, are in lockstep of they want to race a certain way and only police a certain way. But you won't have respect if that racing isn't policed. So if they come to the series or the series comes to them, however the conversation goes, and the conversations are going, that they want to be policed a certain way, they want to race each other a certain way, it needs to be enforced. So now the series is enforcing it, and they have been. At all levels now across the series, the penalty system's coming in. So now it's still on the drivers to accept that, okay, we're going to accept this guy wants us to race this way and we're going to race that way. When there's a lack of respect, that second X30 heat was ugly. The third one was good. The main event was okay. But you need consequences for the respect to be there as well. You can't just rely on driver respect, So, great comment here from Justin Domey. Respect is there mostly, but when you pay a few thousand for a race, the pressure's higher to do good results. Exactly. Like you're pressured to perform. You're going to do everything in your power to get the result. And so you need that consequence to keep you in check as well. It's about, you can't just say the drivers don't respect each other. And you can't just have the officials giving penalties either, because if the officials give penalties and the drivers don't care, they'll still get penalties. So the penalties got to have teeth, and it's got to change the mindset of the drivers. I think we're starting to see that change. It's a long process. That license system won't come into effect until 24, and even through next year, there'll be growing pains with it, and probably into 25 to figure it out. But I think we're moving in that direction, and I think the respect level is as high as it's been. I think they all do respect each other to a good degree. Like I said, the Zach versus Ryan thing didn't have respect there, but everything else, Marian versus AJ, the shifter guys all got respect. The X30 guys in the top 15 to 20 that we normally talk about, I think the respect is there too, and they talk to each other, which is good. So I don't think it's bad, but at least in the headline classes. But it needs to go hand in hand with the officials' penalties, which I think we're starting to see too. So I don't think it's gone out the window.
Yeah, very good points there. Drivers need a sandbox to play in. You need to set the outside of the sandbox, set the limits there. And speaking about penalties, this was a good point as well. Somebody was asking, why don't drivers get black flagged off the track for bad driving anymore? I think this was a comment from a post we had shared from the USPKS about that. But basically asking, back 15, 20 years ago, you'd get a waved black flag and they'd pull you off the track if you did something bad enough. And we're seeing less of that now. And we talked about it a bit, but Xander, what were your thoughts on this question here?
So, yeah, the last time I can think of a driver getting black flagged off the racetrack for over-aggressive driving was Luke in ROK Jr. for spinning out Gaffera at the first winter tour of the year in 22 at Pompano Beach. When it's just point blank as a takeout and someone gets a good eye on it, like you can see that guy just straight up whacked that guy off the racetrack and spun him out, then I've seen it happen. So it's not that it doesn't happen. But most of our incidents aren't that bad, which goes back on the driver respect thing. I don't think any of them are intentionally taking each other out. They're racing hard. So it's just a little over the limit. But when it's a little bit over the limit and it comes down to judgment, and you've got a culture in the U.S. that's sue happy, that's why we have protests. And you've got all the video replay in the world between the series that have video systems like SCUSA and ROK and soon to be Stars. When you've got onboard cameras, which all the series use, you get proven wrong and you get burned really badly in the court of public opinion if you do black flag someone and you do it wrong. And these comments come up because no one's doing it and has been burned. If some series black flagged all the time and got it wrong, that series would die. There's no question. That series would die. So that's why they don't. No one does it because they know they don't want to die. And you can get guys pretty good after the fact, whether it's suspensions now, probations, post-race penalties. And at least then, if it's after the fact, if they got it wrong, which they do, I mean, they're not perfect. You can't do 400 and 500 and 600 penalties in a 3 days, 2 day span and get every single one right. That's why we have the protest room. Sometimes they literally get the wrong cart number because through the radio channel to the timing and scoring person and then into just inputting the number on the sheet and then back down to the next person in the lines. You're talking 3 to 4 people through the chain of command down to the penalty steward to hand the penalty out. There's a lot of room for error to get the wrong guy or call the incident wrong. And that's why you don't see black flags, because if they do get it wrong, they want to be able to make it right. And all the series do a pretty good job of trying to make it right. USPKS overturned a handful of penalties this weekend. SCUSA does every weekend. ROK does every weekend. Stars will do some this weekend. That's all in place. So it is there. They can do it. Should they do it? No, because they will get crucified if they do, and they are wrong.
Well, the next question then is there any type of definitive source on what is and what isn't allowed and what may be considered allowed but dirty?
Yes and no. The handful of different rule books do outline some basics. The USPKS Tech Bulletin was good. The drivers meeting for SCUSA that they've been doing recently is good. We've thrown around the idea. Actually, have some meetings later this week with a few other race directors to talk about doing something like this. I've wanted to do a video series for a long time that outlines the basic understanding of etiquette that's not outlined by the rule book, so people can understand what's okay. We talk about holding the outside a lot. That's a common thing in racing that's different in karting. Whereas if you are halfway up or further back, you should back out. And if you don't, you can stay there, but it's at your own risk of getting pushed off the racetrack. So little stuff like that. Blocking, for example, you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want to go low into a corner and defend the inside, you're not allowed to open back up. And starts, tram lines. Some of the rule books are really explicit on some things. I don't think there's a single rule book that's explicit on everything. And so, unfortunately, that means it relies on teams or drivers themselves to learn and trial by fire or to learn off a coach from them. And everybody's opinion's different. We've talked about this a lot. I don't think there's a right or wrong opinion in a lot of cases. The places that aren't outlined are because people don't agree. That's okay. But you need to, as a series and as a sport, we need to all kind of come together. We're obviously not fully aligned. Reading that tech bulletin, SCUSA is okay with a little contact because they got told that they're penalizing too much. USPKS said they don't want any contact. That's okay. Even it's all right, I think, to have differences of opinion series to series, but if it's directly outlined. So it is something we're working on. I haven't, I'll be honest, I haven't worked on it hard. I could work on it harder on making that video series come together or some articles come together. I did it a while back for Atlanta Motorsports Park for their original rule book when I was 16 years old, and there's stuff that I disagree with that I would change on it and would go the other way with how I wrote all those descriptions. So we have that across the board, myself included, of difference of opinion on how we should race and how they are raced right now. The good news is in the senior classes at the front of the field and a little bit in the midfield, there is a general understanding of how they should race. So if you pulled the drivers and you had them give input, which we could do, and put a generic of, hey, here's how you should race to not get penalized, I think you would have a pretty standardized way of doing it. But right now, there really isn't something that covers everything.
Yeah, very, very case by case there. We're going to change gears a little bit now. This was something that was asked on Facebook. Somebody was asking about, should there be a requirement to have an ambulance at the track for all major events? I don't know. Was there not an ambulance at Houston? Was that why that came up specifically there?
Yes. At Houston, there was a medic with a bag on a golf cart with everything. This is a common misconception, I think, for a lot of people. There is the doomsday scenario of obviously a driver having a life-threatening injury and getting transported. I don't know what that looks like because we ran into this when I was helping manage the racetrack down in Homestead. What most people don't understand is that when you do have an ambulance on site at a racetrack, a lot of times that ambulance's insurance does not allow them to transport to a hospital. And we see this even when the bus is at the track, when the ambulance is there on site at the circuit, that the ambulance at the circuit still has to wait for an actual 911 ambulance from the hospital to drive up, show up, transfer the driver from the ambulance on site to the one that's shown up, and then transport away. So in 99% of cases where it's not life-threatening, which we haven't seen in a long time, thankfully, knock on wood and everything, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you just have a medic with all the tools inside the box truck, including the not table, but gurney, I guess. He could have the gurney. He could have all of his tools. He could have all of his training for an ambulance, just not be in a box truck. and it does exactly the same job because that box truck might not be insured to be able to transport to the hospital. So in a lot of cases, while the perception of most people is, hey, we got to have an ambulance on site at all times, that ambulance most of the time isn't even able to drive to the hospital. It has to be a different ambulance that shows up anyway. What I don't know is, does that change if someone could potentially die, like internal bleeding or something like that? I don't know. I need to get some more information on that to answer that question properly. But in 99% of cases, and in every injury that an ambulance has been transported in the last however many years that I've been announcing and we've been covering races, there's been no life-threatening injuries, just broken bones and stuff like that. And that we've always had to wait on another ambulance to show up, and it delays the day either way. It's not like the ambulance leaves and you wait on another one to show. 99% of cases, the second ambulance has to come up because the ambulance that the track is contracted isn't insured to go to the hospital. It's insured to treat at the racetrack in the box. So it's a fair argument, but I don't think that it makes a difference in any way.
So I actually have a follow-up extension to this. This is something that I had heard. There are some tracks supposedly that are close enough to a hospital that in a situation where they would normally need an ambulance, it can get there quick enough. Is that any part of a factor into like a track by track thing, or is that something that doesn't really play into effect when you're looking at these kind of scenarios?
It is. In Vegas at Rock Rio, there was a medical center literally next door to the paddock. At Speed Sports, there's a medical center right there. I mean, you could throw someone in a truck on that gurney and go and be there in 2 minutes quicker than an ambulance showing up. So that's probably another thing too. The cost is normally marginally the same. It's just an availability of buses or trucks with the box on the back. But yeah, I mean, these guys, it's not negligence. I think is the thing. The perception is negligence. It's not negligence. All these tracks that we visit, the series vet extensively. I can promise you that if they weren't already, which they already are, the pressure of the fact that we've gone down to 2 major insurers in the entire country for the sport of karting is putting these guys under pressure where they need to be ready for every doomsday scenario. Every series promoter, every track owner, that goes into every bit of consideration when they want to host any kind of event, especially a national race. So if they go, hey, this is the best course of action to transport a driver in any kind of scenario, that's thought out. But as for not having to answer your question, yes, it may be more convenient to have a truck right there. I know at Homestead sometimes we wouldn't have the bus; we'd have a pickup truck, all the same tools of the bus, same ability as the bus. It just wouldn't be an ambulance. People would freak out that there's not an ambulance there, but it doesn't make a difference. They have everything in the ambulance, and they can't transport anyway. Or if they can, it's more convenient that way to go in the way they are. So that's another thing too, that, yeah, if the track does have an emergency plan, which they all do, they're all vetted before a series go there. You don't have anything to worry about.
Well, we're going to be switching gears a little bit here now, Xander. This question comes in is, would an FIA type of park firm or fuel and tires be beneficial during major events?
I mean, yes and no. So I actually questioned a couple guys about it. First concern with the fuel is all the fuel being in one place. Is that more dangerous, less dangerous for the fire marshal? It's actually less dangerous. So it's not a liability of putting all the fuel in one place. The first two things with that, number one is cost. If we want to ask for something like that, that's, 6 to 8 extra staff for the series. And when you think of a person at an event, let's say bottom level pricing, $200 a day on labor. An event is going to last at least 4 days, so $800 there. That person needs a hotel room. Hotels, you're not going to put them in a Motel 6. You're going to put them somewhere decent. So 100 to 150 a night. Let's go on the high end, 150 a night. So you're talking 5 nights of hotel at 150. That's why can't I do math? $600. 750
for 5. It should be 750.
750 at 150, $750 in hotel, $800 in labor. So already you're at $1,550 plus their airfare or fuel to get there. So add another $400 on top of it. You're roughly $2,000 per person. And if you need, let's say, 8 people, that's all of a sudden now $16,000 that an event has to put up just to put Park from A to keep everybody from cheating. So that's a big expense. That's a big eat. 16,000 multiplied by the number of events they do. That's a lot of entry fee money. If you divided 16,000 divided by 2 or 300, that's still a fair bit that our entries would go up. So if some series wanted to do it, first would be the cost. Everyone's entry fee will go up substantially, at least probably $100 to $200. And the secondary thing is logistics. I mean, we're here at Trackhouse Motorplex. This place is tight for a series to come in just for grid and scales on moving people around. There's not really room for a park for May without doing it on the back end and eating it into pit space. And pit space for this weekend at only 230 entries, they oversold. They have 17 extra drivers that are pitting outside of the paddock. At Speed Sports, same thing. It'd be really tricky to try and navigate and set up a park for May there. There's just not the space. Most of the tracks aren't built with space for park for May for fuel and tires to have that all safely. And then you're talking, from what I can estimate, on the low end, $16,000, probably $20,000 to oversee it with trained personnel that we've got to find. I mean, the series, all of them are always looking for more help. So if anyone wants to make this happen, if you want to say here's 6 or 8 guys that could pull it off, then maybe. But we're just talking numbers and logistics as the first 2 hurdles. And the third would be finding the people to work it, because it's hard enough to find enough staff for all these races. I remember working for tracks where we were scrambling weeks out to find enough corner marshals, trained race directors. We have a shortage of officials already, so you're talking for more. But 3 problems to overcome just to keep people from cheating. I think you're better off with, trying to do better on fuel testing, tire testing, sending stuff to the lab after the fact. It's a much cheaper and more efficient alternative for the handful of times that you would catch someone. Not to mention, it would definitely make everybody's job in the pits a lot harder, because when they say park for May, that means literally dismounting your tires off of the wheels every session and remounting every session, which is tough because a lot of people in the pits use tools. Not a lot of people use it by hand. That's a lot of mounting and dismounting of tires that we would be asking for. So it's not as realistic as everybody thinks it is to pull that off.
All right. And again, just bounce around a little bit more. And these questions are a little bit less joined together. But somebody was wondering what's going to happen with the 175 SSE now. We've had USPKS as KZ only at this point, and they were kind of wondering why it's all of a sudden an issue after Billy Musgrave won in Orlando, and it wasn't an issue before or anything like that. We've covered it a little bit, but just maybe try to go over it again, get some more clarity as to what the future might hold for these and why the issue is being brought up now with these 175s.
Yeah. One good point Billy made, we had him on the show a few weeks ago, was that, there were races last year and the year before when guys gapped the field by multiple seconds on the package they were on and dominated. AJ even made the point that he dominated on the 175 in 2020, then dominated on the KZ in 21. What's going to happen? I mean, for SCUSA, the right way, once the public outrage dies down, is to at least evaluate data after Utah. If Billy goes out and, dominates in Utah and the other guys on 175 dominate on Utah, then you've got an argument. But we went to a track with the tightest hairpin in the entire North American national circuit that favored the bottom end power that motor has. They've made adjustments at the end of last year that we really only saw at that race pay off. USPKS didn't have any 175 guys, so it made sense. SCUSA wants to keep the engine around because it's a competitive motor that you can get, whereas in KZ, you've, in the perception, need to be a factory aligned guy to get the best motor, whereas there you can buy the best motor because it's right off his go-kart. He'll sell it to you. But the top guys, they're all supported by the different factories. So it's not like you're going to see Kremers or AJ or Danny on a 175. Kremers is a PSL TM guy. AJ is an SRP TM guy. Danny is a Vortex, KZ guy. So the future of it, it's a good engine. They've sorted everything out with it. Seems like it runs pretty good from everyone that still has one that says the longevity is really good on the motor. 30 on the top, 60 on the bottom, or something crazy. But what you'll see on the national scene, USPKS didn't have any to begin with. They didn't want to deal with the problem. Stars has some, went to what they felt like was safe, which was the 2021 rule set. SCUSA, I don't know. I haven't asked them what they want to do. My guess is they're going to run through the next race and kind of evaluate and try and make sure they have a good balance if it's imbalanced and fix it. But I don't think they want to do a knee-jerk reaction. But it's not going away. It's still a good motor. SCUSA is still allowing it to run. I think they want to allow it to run for the long term. It's around in road racing and club racing stuff too.
Well, we're going to go into something a little more exciting, I have to say, especially with me and you, Xander, working together on the production side on certain things. But this question is, can we get live onboards on the live stream?
Yes. Yes, we can. We tested our first ever live onboard last weekend at Houston. Testing in the first stage went pretty good. And for a teaser exclusive scoop here for everyone watching tonight, we should be able to have our first ever live onboard into our broadcast integrated this week for the Stars Night Fight. So it's a process. There's a lot to still evaluate of if we can switch it to drivers from the scales to the grid. If we have to stick with one guy for the whole day, I think this weekend we'll stick with one guy for the whole day. See how the battery lasts, see what the range looks like, see what the quality is, see what everybody thinks of it. But it's been 8 months in the works so far. Big thanks to everyone that's made it possible to get to this point. It's not as easy as what everybody thinks it is. GoPros have the ability to live stream, but they don't. You have to run it with a delay if you run over the internet. So if you want it integrated in the live stream and to be on live time, we have to do it the way that we've done it, which is a little more expensive. We spent some money in it. We've been, working on it, and we have it in our hands. It's going to go on a go-kart this weekend. I don't know which one yet. Otherwise, I would tell you. I got to decide that. We're gonna break it out. We're gonna try it. We're gonna see how it goes.
All right, well, that's really cool. I didn't even know that was going to happen, so that's super cool to hear about. Up next is a question. I'm assuming somebody from California was asking if there's any chance that we would start covering the SCUSA California Pro Kart Challenge. I have no idea what that would look like for us, so Xander, take it away.
Obviously we work with SCUSA a lot. They are great with us. Nothing but good things to say. I like to do all of our coverage at a pretty high level. I don't want to run with one announcer. I don't want to run with one camera. It takes a village to pull off the streams we have. For example, this weekend we'll have 10, if not 11 people on site to do the Stars series. And to be honest, I'd like to up that number. I'd like to put more cameras on the racetrack and more stuff. If we want to do an onboard camera that floats driver to driver, that means another person that needs to oversee that. Even this weekend, we'll probably be stretching ourselves a little thin to check in on the driver that we're going to put it on to make sure that it's powered up and that it powers off so we save the battery. And with all that said, we're getting there on getting bigger corporate partners. Big parts our viewership. Thanks to everybody, the KC family, and everyone tuning in from around the world. That the more views we get on each of these races, the closer we get to getting on the radar of these bigger companies that could put some money into us that doesn't need us to bleed the series dry. Because the way our deals work is the series get a discount. Every ad dollar we bring in for these events goes off the series tab, and then the series is able to kind of do what they wish with it for the most part. So it's tough to justify from a series perspective, and I understand it. We are as lean as we can be with the subscriptions. That makes it where we don't have to charge the series as much, and we can survive as a company and get by with where we're at right now. But when you're at an event that is sub 150 entries, it's tough to justify. It's tough to put a needle, a return on investment on the short term for streaming How many entries does it bring? Does it really move the needle a lot? We don't have any proven data. We've been at every major series since our day one, with the exception of Rock Vegas last year. So there's no proof that a national series has gone down or gone up by having us. And the same for the regionals. I think there's value there. I think they all agree with it, and that's why we're here. But it is tough on the books for it to make sense. So as of today, there's no plans to do SKUSA California Pro Kart this year. If that series blossoms, balloons, goes to 200 plus, sure. But as it stands, it doesn't really make sense to go there and to try and go down that road right now.
The next question is, why isn't there a 65 and older class?
Just numbers. The national circuit really should be the best of the best. At the local and the regional level, the numbers aren't there to have it. If at a local level and a regional level, regional pushing it, there's only so much time for classes in a day. Even with USPKS, I heard a couple guys talking about how much the gaps were on Sunday from their warm up to their main event. It was as much as 4 or 5 hours. You add more classes, you make your day longer, you make less track time for everybody else that's already there. There's no room for a 65 and up masters class. There's barely room for a master's class, period. USPKS doesn't even have a shifter master class. SKUSA runs it as a subclass. Stars has a couple less single speed classes without the 125 juniors, so they're able to have a shifter master class. But there's no room for it at the national circuit, and there's just not enough entries at the local level to have it. But the closest thing you got is the CKNA guys. They have a 50 and up class, and that's pretty cool. And I mean, karting, we talked about with Talon and, with everybody else, it's a physically demanding sport. So you don't find a lot of 65 and up guys want to go faster than a 206, which is perfectly fine. But you won't see it with like a 65 and up shifter or X30 or KA, it shouldn't be at that level to begin with. But at the other races, 50 and up legends is CKNA. It's so far going good. So maybe in a couple of years, you could have a 206, 65 and up and get the young, ripe 50-year-olds out of your way.
Yeah, those 50-year-olds get at it, man. Those Legends races can get pretty good sometimes. They're pretty fun. Next up is a question. I think this is a little bit of interesting speculation here, but I'm asking when, or really if, and then when by extension, will OKN replace X30 at the national events? This has been a really interesting question for me to try to kind of think about it a little bit. But Xander, what are your thoughts about it?
I think if you wanted X30 to die, you needed Ryan Norberg to dominate for the next 2 years, and he's not. Talking with all the drivers in the paddock last weekend, they felt the parity in X30 was as good as it's ever been, power plant wise. The benefits of OKN is just like we talked about in KZ with Kremers and AJ and Danny all being supported by different factories to go compete in that class engine wise. You do have that window with OKN. But there's a lot of hurdles for that class just to survive that it's got to get over. This weekend's got 16 or 18 on the pre-entry list. That needs to go good. The year needs to go good. People need to be happy with the way the engine is. It can't have a lot of bugs. So far, it seems like it's okay, pun intended. But would it replace it? You're guessing way out, and you need dominoes to fall. If it's going to replace it, X30 needs to die. I don't see it dying. It seems really healthy in the senior stuff. Junior's a different story, but it's a different issue. It's not so much a parity issue. It's a cost thing. Running as many races as we run, it's more engine time and whatnot. And, you just don't have as many parents that are able to shell it out. And there's really not any sponsored rides in X30 Junior, like the top 10 to 15 of X30 Senior are sponsored rides. So I don't know. There's a lot that would need to change. You're talking prediction and gambling territory. So you want to play some bets. If we had kart betting, you could bet that it could replace it, but that's all you're doing right now.
Well, continuing on that trend of the OKN package, will OKN or KA Senior be the premier single-speed class this weekend at Stars, or just better point out, maybe if you want to stretch a little further, for the entire season?
OKN will be the premier single-speed class. That's the idea. By not having X30, not having ROK GP, OKN is the premier class. The idea is KA is your entry point into stars. Without 206, that's the bottom level or the semi-pro, the base level. And in theory, you perform in KA, and then you're able to, work a deal out to move up to OKN. Now, racing's expensive. There's no scholarship program in place yet. I'd like to try and make some stuff happen to help the series make that work. I don't want to say it's on the series to do that. They're already stretched thin budget-wise. Again, that's why Park for May is not a thing. But OKN's a premier class. KA, great class, great entries. But if you're able to, and if you're good enough, the goal should be to move up to OKN and not just continue to beat up on KA guys, because we got a lot of guys coming into KA this weekend, moving up to the National for the first time, moving up to the KA for the first time. That's what that should be for, with the way that the series is structured. At the regional level, when you have 206 in KA, you should hope that the best 206 guys move up from 206 to KA and make room for new guys in 206 to make a name for themselves and win, and then move on to KA. So in the same way, OKN is the premier, Pro Stars with KZ is the premier, and KA is the stepping stone.
Very good points. Moving on from there, still kind of within some class discussion. Were there any? What were your thoughts on the S5 junior shifter program that's died down in the last few years? And what do you think there would need to be for there to be a replacement category? What engine type? What would need to happen to get that category going? I think we talked about this a little bit with Andy Seisman a couple weeks ago with Challenge of the Americas. But Xander, what's your detail on it?
Yeah, just look at the X30 junior numbers. There's nobody with the budgets to run even X30 junior or the interest. Maybe with something new, a new shiny toy, shifter class for junior would start off and be okay. It would take a lot of legwork and a lot of promotion. Like in Andy's case, it wasn't something that he was going out of his way to do. He was making room to say, hey, people had asked for it. He put it out there and nobody showed up. So, the engine package, all it's been in the past, the Honda was great. Not a good way to there's not really a good detuned 175 or KZ for junior. The YZ65 that Billy Musgrave just strapped on a cadet and put out a video on social media today is cool and concept and great for testing. But the market's not there. If we were racing 4 times a year for nationals, and the fields were more condensed, and you had a full X30 junior field and a full K junior field, you could make an argument that there's enough drivers to go around. You could fill a junior shifter field, but it's not there. There's not enough space. There's really not a lot of demand besides a few purists that would like it to be there. And it would be cool if it got going, but there's not really an avenue. The better way to do it is keep growing senior shifter, get the senior shifters filled up, and create a semi-pro shifter class again. And then if semi-pro and pro shifter are filled up, then you can have junior S5. But when S5 junior was kicking, S2 semi-pro shifter at Supernats was at 88 entries, and S1 was at a full sold out of 44. So you had 132 senior shifters to make a grid of 30 junior shifters. Not to mention the junior demand. So we're at 20 shifters in senior. We're a long way from having enough shifters out there to say, hey, let's make a junior shifter. Long ways away if we ever get back there.
Continuing more on the shifter category then, why has shifters been struggling at the local levels or the local clubs since the stock Honda went away?
Question kind of answers itself. Stock Honda was the Briggs 206 for shifter racing. It was economical. It ran forever. It was super cheap to buy. There was a big used market. The 175 could be that to revive the local shifter racing. The ROK shifter can be as well. There's not a lot of used shifters around with those engines that are up to date. There's a handful of ROK shifters around. But, both of those motors are still leaps and bounds above the expense of a stock Honda, at least to run at the local level. So, and the chassis for shifters are a lot more expensive. 20 years ago, a shifter chassis was or $5,000 less. Inflation hit, so I mean, I may be wrong in that 4,000, 5,000 comment, but there's the closest engines we have to that stock Honda era are more expensive. The chassis are now more expensive. That just makes it where for the local budget guy, it's just kind of out of reach.
All right, we're going to start moving on to the Facebook and YouTube comments from the live stream now. First one I thought was a bit fun. When are we getting a team owner KA race? So you grab Mike Rollison already races right now, grab Mike Doty, grab all the team owners, put them in a KA. When is that going to happen?
Shout out Beckett Friesen. I know that's coming straight from his team owner, T-Mac. And he called me on the road this week asking about it, what he thought. I think it'd be cool, especially if you put them in race carts and not rental carts. I think a lot of kids don't realize that their team owners used to be pretty badass drivers back in the day. I don't know. It's an option for some kind of event that wants to try something special. But it would be cool. It would be cool to see those guys get out there and rip. You know, I mean, Mike Rollison, Mike Doty, the list goes on. Every team owner at one point was a driver, and a lot of them tell you how good they were as a driver. To go out and prove that they're good against the other guys that say they were good would be cool. Jamie Siraki, not too long ago, went out there and won an X30 Masters race a few years back. So there's some good shoes out there. That would be fun. I think the fences would be lined. Maybe it replaces the Miami Grands rental cart race, but I don't promote events. So, you know, that'd be cool. I can pass it along and, you know, but it's not just me. If you guys want to make that happen, if the sport wants to make that happen, community, you want to see your team owners go after and get it, write in responses to the series owners you want to see it at. Get a group of y'all, get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 parents that say, hey, make some time in your schedule. We want team owners to race. And if enough people, if enough parents, if enough drivers ask a series to do something in the U.S., one will do it, if not all of them. So you want to make it happen? Hey, here's some publicity to go start the mission.
I have to say that would be a fun event. The next one comes from David Taylor. It is, how much does the average KZ shifter cart weigh with no lead and driver, and looking to get into the sport, lose weight, but what driver weight makes it being able to be competitive? And of course, he loves our videos, so we can't say thank you enough, David, for tuning in today.
At the weight, I think Danny normally tries to get down to 185 pounds as a driver for senior shifter. So I guess by definition, that makes the cart 210, more or less. They run around 395 to 400 to 390. So between 200 to 210 pounds for the shifter cart engine and chassis and front brakes and everything. Safe driver weight to get down to is about $180, $185. You get below $180, you're safe.
I think it's been pretty standard across most of the classes now. I remember like the KA weight's like 180 or 190 as well, but that's good to know. Bryce Frank asked us if we think that, or you think that series should be posting tech infractions. I'm assuming he means like posting them online and publicizing them for everybody to see on social media after the weekend's done or something like that.
Yeah, it would be cool. It would be a disruption to the system. They would probably get some negative feedback from the guys that they put on blast, engine builders or chassis or team owners or drivers initially. But it's not a bad idea. It puts the cheaters out there, lets you know who they are. Thing to remember is that, you know, sometimes guys make a mistake, squish. People run to the limit sometimes, and sometimes you get pushed on squish. Sometimes you mixed your fuel wrong. Sometimes it's bad reading where you just didn't do a different can and there was some residue. But, you know, it would cause a little short-term headache. In the long term, it would probably be good. It just, you know, puts the series in an awkward spot initially. So you're putting pressure on them, but it's just as I said before, if enough people ask for it, they'll do it. The series listen.
Yeah, it certainly is. And of course, Racy Junkie was a few minutes late, but he was talking about the Park Firm question. Is that suspecting that tires and fuel doping is happening?
Not necessarily. But it's a problem that never goes away. That's one of those things. I mean, it's why we have post-race engine teardown. It's a battle you never fully win, or at least a war you never fully win. You might win the battle race to race of catching a guy or clearing guys out. You know, with the park for May, the fuel, the tire doping, it comes around and it goes. We had grumblings of it earlier this year. It's not rampant. It's not bad. The series are always fighting that battle. It's not new. It's never going to go away, but it'll never, be like, okay, everybody's doing it, because the series are pretty vigilant about that. So whenever they feel like it's out of hand, what you normally see is the series, like I was mentioning earlier, they'll send tires off to the lab. There's a few labs around the country. They've sent motors to the original factories to have a once over. They do extra stuff with the fuel. You'll see series do a lot of random pump arounds where the top 10 or top 5 guys will show up to the grid for a class, and they'll say empty your fuel tanks, empty your fuel lines, and the tech will provide the fuel before a main event to try and disperse it. So it's not rampant. The tire doping is a bigger problem for the 4-cycle community because the same engines and by adherence the same drivers, and people normally come out of the dirt karting world, and in the dirt karting world tire doping is okay, it's allowed. So you have guys coming from that mindset thinking they can still work around the sprint guys, and most of the time they get caught. But it's not new. It isn't bad. I don't think anyone's really tire doping at our big races that I know of. And for the fuel stuff, it's always an ongoing thing they're fighting. They're constantly trying to find ways to get it. So I don't know someone personally that said, hey, I cheated last race, Xander, here you go, I got by him. But, nobody wants to do it. No engine builder or team owner wants to have that in the sport, which is good. So at least the guys that are active, there's constantly a fight to get the 1 or 2 guys that maybe try it, to get them out or to get them to stop.
I think we lost Aaron.
I'm sorry, we had something going on in the background. I believe that's all that we have for questions for the rest of the show. Xander, you want to give us a little bit of a preview on what's going to happen with Stars this weekend?
Yeah. So it's a night race, Trackhouse Motorplex. My dad's already given me crap that I need to start a counter for how many times I'm going to mess it up. Call it GoPro. Trackhouse Motorplex in Mooresville, night fight. Go live on Friday, live all the way through Saturday. Premium members for the main event Saturday night. Should be a lot of fun. Going to be a little cold. Chance of rain Saturday. Could mix things up. I got the heater cranked on in the RV. It's going to be a chilly weekend. Got the jackets going. It should be fun. Got a few weeks off after this. We'll do some more resets, some more growing, some more building, and we'll see everybody after the break's over. So I think that'll wrap up KC Happy Hour. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.